He's not dead. 8-year-old girl stops Hell's Angels funeral to save him. In 3 words. The leather creaked as 200 bikers shifted in their seats. Inside the ironclad chapel, somewhere in the dusty heart of Arizona, the air was thick with grief and motor oil. Sunlight barely broke through the stained glass windows, casting shadows across rows of men who'd seen too much and said too little. At the front of the room sat a casket. It was draped in black and orange, the colors of the Hells Angels. On top rested a worn motorcycle helmet and a pair of riding gloves, still shaped like the hands that once wore them. Marcus Steele Donovan was inside that box. At least that's what everyone believed. The pastor, a nervous man who'd never officiated a biker funeral before, cleared his throat. His voice trembled as he spoke. Brothers, sisters, we gather today to honor a man who lived by his own code, a warrior, a protector, a legend. Around the room, grown men wiped their eyes. Some stared at the floor. Others clenched their jaws so hard you could see the muscles working beneath their beards. These were dangerous men, men who'd faced prison, bullets, and betrayal. But today, they were just broken. One biker stood to speak. His name was Grizz, and he was built like a bear. His voice cracked as he talked about the time Marcus saved him from a burning bike. Another brother shared a story about Marcus scaring off drug dealers who'd been circling the local middle school. Outside, Harley-Davidsons lined the parking lot like soldiers at attention. Their chrome gleamed in the desert sun. Everything was still. Everything was final. The pastor raised his hands. Let us commit his soul to eternal rest. He's not dead. The words came from the back of the chapel, quiet at first, almost a whisper. Every head turned. Standing in the doorway was a little black girl. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Her brown hair was tangled and wild like she'd been running through thorns. Dirt smudged her cheeks. Her clothes were 2 sizes too big, hanging off her skinny frame like hand-me-downs that had been handed down too many times. She was shaking, but her eyes, those wide, desperate eyes, were locked on the casket. The room held its breath. She took 1 step forward, then another. Her bare feet made no sound on the cold floor. And then she said it again, louder this time. He's not dead. Have you ever known something was wrong when everyone around you believed the opposite? Maybe you felt it in your gut. Maybe you saw something nobody else saw. Drop a comment and tell me about it. Because what happened next in that chapel, what this little girl was about to do, would prove that sometimes the smallest voice tells the biggest truth. If you want to know how an 8-year-old stopped a funeral and saved a man's life with just 3 words, you'd better hit that subscribe button right now. Because this story is about to take a turn nobody saw coming. But before we understand why this little girl crashed a biker funeral, we need to go back. Back to who Marcus Steele Donovan really was. And back to the night that connected him to a child he barely knew. Marcus was 42 years old, but his body told the story of someone who'd lived twice that long. His arms were covered in tattoos, skulls, eagles, the names of brothers who'd fallen. Scars crisscrossed his knuckles from fights he'd won and a few he'd lost. His face was hard, the kind of hard that comes from seeing too much darkness in the world. He was the road captain of the Hells Angels desert chapter. That meant he planned the rides, protected the crew, and made sure the club's code was respected. And Marcus had one rule he never broke: protect the weak, punish the wicked. 15 years ago, Marcus had a younger sister named Emily. She was bright and full of life, until the wrong people got their hooks into her. Drugs came first, then the dealers, then the men who saw her as nothing more than something to use and throw away. Marcus found her too late. She was 23 when she overdosed in a motel room on the edge of town. That loss changed him, hardened him, but it also gave him purpose. Since that day, Marcus quietly patrolled the forgotten corners of their small Arizona town. He chased off dealers who lurked near schools. He scared away predators who circled vulnerable women and kids. He didn't do it for glory. He didn't even tell his brothers most of the time. He just did it. Because if he couldn't save Emily, maybe he could save someone else's sister, someone else's daughter. And 3 months ago, he saved Lila. Lila Reeves was 8 years old, but she'd already learned lessons no child should know. She lived in a rusted trailer on the outskirts of town with her mother, Renee. The trailer's windows were cracked. The door didn't lock. Inside, it smelled like cigarettes and regret. Renee loved her daughter, but addiction loved Renee more. And then there was Colt. Colt was Renee's boyfriend, if you could call him that. He was a weasel of a man with greasy hair and cold eyes. He came and went like a disease, always bringing trouble with him. When he was around, Lila learned to make herself invisible. She stayed quiet. She stayed small. She survived. Teachers didn't notice her. Neighbors looked the other way. The system had too many cases and not enough people who cared. Lila was a ghost in her own life, until the night Colt decided she was worth something. 3 months ago, Colt owed money to the wrong people. Dangerous people. People who didn't accept excuses. So he made Renee a deal she was too high to understand, and he made plans to sell Lila to pay off his debt. He told her to get in his truck, told her they were going for a ride. His smile was the kind that made her stomach hurt. But Lila ran. She didn't get far. Colt caught her in the parking lot of a closed-down gas station, his hand clamped around her arm like a vice. She screamed, but no one came. No one ever came. Except that night, someone did. A motorcycle roared into the parking lot. The headlight cut through the dark like a blade. The engine went silent, and a man stepped off the bike. He was big, covered in leather and ink. His boots hit the pavement like thunder. Marcus didn't say much. He didn't need to. He looked at Colt, then at Lila, then back at Colt. Let her go. Colt tried to lie, tried to say she was his kid, that it was none of Marcus's business. But Marcus saw through it. He always did. What happened next, Lila didn't fully understand. She remembered the sound of Colt's arm breaking. She remembered him screaming as he scrambled into his truck and sped away. She remembered the way Marcus knelt down in front of her, his voice suddenly soft. "You're safe now, kid." He didn't ask her name. She didn't ask his. But she looked at his jacket, the Hells Angels patch on the back, and she memorized it. She looked into his eyes and saw something she hadn't seen in a long time. Someone who cared. He made sure she got home, watched until she was inside. Then he disappeared into the night, just another shadow on a motorcycle. Lila never saw him again. Until 1 week ago, when everything changed. Marcus was found in his garage, unresponsive. His brother said it was a heart attack. The paramedics who arrived agreed. In a small town with an overworked coroner and a biker club that valued privacy, no one asked too many questions. No autopsy. No investigation. Marcus Steele Donovan was declared dead. The funeral was arranged fast. That's how bikers did it. Ride hard, mourn fast, and never look back. But the night before that funeral, Colt came back. Renee, barely conscious and slumped on the couch, didn't stop him. She didn't even notice when he leaned down and whispered into Lila's ear, his breath reeking of cheap beer and malice. "Your biker night ain't coming this time. He's dead, and you're mine now." Lila's blood turned to ice. She ran, again, barefoot, terrified. 8 miles through the desert in the dark, following the distant rumble of motorcycle engines. She didn't know exactly where she was going, but she knew where bikers gathered, and she knew something else. Something nobody would believe. 2 days after Marcus was supposed to have died, Lila had seen him. She'd been walking past an old warehouse on the edge of town when she looked through a window. Inside, slumped in a couch, was the man with the jacket. The man who'd saved her. He wasn't moving much. His head hung forward. But his chest, she saw it. It rose. It fell. He was breathing. And the night before the funeral, she'd heard Colt on the phone, laughing, bragging. "Yeah, I spiked his drink. Fool won't wake up for days. By the time they figure it out, we'll be gone." Lila didn't understand all the words, but she understood enough. Marcus wasn't dead, and if she didn't do something right now, he would be. The chapel exploded into chaos. "Who the hell is this kid?" Someone shouted from the back. "How'd she even get in here?" Another voice demanded. Bikers rose from their seats, dust, confusion, and anger rippling through the crowd like wildfire. This was sacred ground, a funeral. You didn't interrupt a funeral, especially not for one of their own. But Lila didn't move. Her bare feet stayed planted on that cold floor, even as 200 pairs of eyes burned into her. A man pushed his way through the crowd. His name was Boone, and he was the sergeant-at-arms, the enforcer. His job was to keep order, to protect the club, and to handle threats. Right now, this little girl felt like a threat. Boone was a wall of muscle, his bald head gleaming under the chapel lights. His voice came out like gravel scraping concrete. Get this kid out of here. Show some respect. He moved toward Lila, his heavy boots thundering against the floor. She flinched but didn't run. Her lips trembled as she forced the words out. I saw him 2 days ago. Boone stopped. He was in a truck, Lila continued, her voice shaking but desperate. He wasn't moving much, but he was breathing. I saw his chest. It went up and down. He's not dead. He's not. Murmurs spread through the room. Some bikers shook their heads. Poor kid, probably traumatized, seeing things that weren't there. Others exchanged uneasy glances. Something about her certainty, her desperation, made them pause. Then Grizz stepped forward. He was Marcus's best friend, the man who'd ridden beside him for 20 years, the man who'd spoken at the funeral and barely held it together. He looked down at Lila, and instead of anger, there was something else in his eyes. Curiosity, maybe even hope. Grizz knelt down so he was eye level with her. His voice was softer than you'd expect from a man his size. Kid, where'd you see him? Lila's words tumbled out fast. The old warehouse, near the train tracks. He was in a chair. There were ropes. I didn't understand, but he was alive. I know he was. The room went silent. You could hear the wind outside rattling the windows. Some of the bikers dismissed her immediately. She's confused, one muttered. Grief does that. Kids see things. But others weren't so sure. Marcus had been healthy, strong. A heart attack out of nowhere? It didn't sit right. There'd been no warning signs, no chest pains, nothing. And then the door slammed open. Every head turned. A man stumbled into the chapel, out of breath and wild-eyed. It was Colt. He forced a smile onto his face, but it didn't reach his eyes. There you are, sweetie, he said, his voice dripping with fake concern. I've been looking everywhere for you. He walked toward Lila, arms outstretched like he was some kind of worried parent. She's my kid, Colt announced to the room, glancing around nervously. She's confused, traumatized, lost her way. Let me take her home so you all can get back to. He's lying! Lila's scream cut through the air like a knife. He's lying. He did something to Marcus. I heard him on the phone. He said he spiked his drink. He said Marcus wouldn't wake up for days. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Colt's smile vanished. His face went pale. She doesn't know what she's saying. She's just a kid. She gets things mixed up. I'm not mixed up, Lila shouted, tears streaming down her face. You said it. You said you'd be gone before anyone figured it out. Colt lunged for her. He moved fast, his hand reaching out to grab her arm and drag her away before she could say anything else, before she could ruin everything. But he didn't make it. Grizz's arm shot out like a steel beam, blocking Colt's path. The smaller man bounced off the biker's chest and stumbled backward. The room went silent, deadly silent. Every biker in that chapel stood, slowly, deliberately, their eyes locked on Colt like wolves circling prey. Grizz didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. You want to tell us what the girl's talking about? Colt backed toward the door, his hands up. I don't know, man. She's crazy. She's been through a lot. Her mom's a junkie. You know how it is. Where's Marcus? Boone's voice was low. Dangerous. He's dead. He's right there. Colt pointed at the casket, his voice rising in panic. You people are insane. You're going to believe some kid over. Open it. The voice came from Grizz. Quiet. Final. The chapel went still. Boone stepped forward, his face twisted in anger, not at Colt, but at the situation, at the impossible choice in front of them. We can't do that, Boone said. If we're wrong, we desecrate Steele's body. We disrespect everything he stood for. And if we're right, Grizz shot back, if there's even a chance she's telling the truth? We don't take orders from some random kid, Boone growled. Marcus deserves peace. Steele saved this girl once, Grizz said, his voice cracking. If there's even a chance he's alive, we owe it to him to check. Lila collapsed to her knees, sobs racking her small body. He saved me, she whispered. Please, please don't let him die for real. The pastor backed away from the casket, shaking his head. I can't be part of this. This is madness. Half the room agreed. Voices rose, some demanding they throw Lila out, others shouting to open the casket. The chapel was seconds away from tearing itself apart. And through it all, Colt stood near the door, a smirk slowly creeping back onto his face. He thought he'd won. He thought they'd never believe her. But he didn't know bikers, and he didn't know what happens when you threaten family. Grizz's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Open it. The room fell silent. Every argument, every shout, every protest died in the air. Boone stared at him. Grizz, if we're wrong, then we're wrong, Grizz interrupted. His jaw was set, his eyes hard. But if that little girl is right and we do nothing, I'll never forgive myself, and neither will you. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Boone cursed under his breath and walked toward the casket. His hands were shaking, something nobody in that room had ever seen before. Two other bikers joined him, their faces pale. They surrounded the casket like it might explode. Boone's fingers found the latches. They clicked open one by one, each sound echoing through the chapel like a gunshot. Lila held her breath. Colt pressed himself against the wall, his face slick with sweat. The lid lifted. At first, nobody could process what they were seeing. Marcus lay inside, dressed in his riding leathers, his hands folded across his chest. His skin was pale, too pale, almost gray. His lips had a bluish tint. He looked dead. See? Boone's voice cracked. She was wrong. We shouldn't have. Wait. Grizz leaned closer, his eyes locked on Marcus's chest. 10 seconds passed, 15, 20, and then so subtle you'd miss it if you blinked, Marcus's chest moved. It rose, just barely, a shallow, weak breath. Then nothing for another 30 seconds. Then it rose again. Oh my God, someone whispered. Get the paramedics! Grizz roared. Now! The chapel erupted. Bikers rushed forward. Someone already had their phone out, screaming into it. Another brother pressed two fingers against Marcus's neck, searching for a pulse. I got something. It's weak, but it's there. He's freezing. Get blankets. Get something warm. How is this possible? He's been like this for a week. Lila stood frozen, tears pouring down her face. She'd been right. She'd been right, and nobody had believed her. Except Grizz. He looked at her across the chaos, and for the first time since she'd burst through those doors, he smiled. A small, broken smile, but a smile nonetheless. You did it, kid, he said softly. You saved him. But in the corner, Colt saw his chance. While everyone was distracted, while the bikers were focused on Marcus, he slipped toward the door. Almost made it, too. Going somewhere? Boone's hand clamped down on Colt's shoulder like a vice. The smaller man yelped, tried to twist away, but it was like trying to escape a bear trap. Grizz turned, his face transforming from relief to pure rage. Get him outside, Grizz said quietly. Too quietly. The parking lot was empty, except for rows of motorcycles gleaming in the sun. Boone and Grizz dragged Colt between them. Two other bikers followed, blocking any escape route. Colt's bravado crumbled. Look, I don't know what that kid told you, but she's lying. Grizz slammed him against a brick wall. Not hard enough to injure, but hard enough to make a point. You got one chance to tell the truth, Grizz growled. What did you do to Marcus? Nothing, I swear Boone leaned in from the other side, all 250 pounds of muscle and fury. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, Boone said, his voice deadly calm. But either way, you're going to talk. Colt's eyes darted between them. He was trapped, cornered, and he knew these men didn't bluff. The words spilled out like poison. I drugged him, okay? Slipped it in his drink at the bar last week. Sedatives mixed with pain pills, enough to knock him out for days, slow his heart, make him look dead. I paid off the coroner's assistant to skip the autopsy. Small town, nobody asks questions. Why? Grizz's voice was barely human. Colt laughed, a desperate, broken sound. Because he ruined everything. He chased me off, broke my arm, cost me money I didn't have. And that little brat, I had a buyer lined up. Good money. Enough to clear my debts and get out of this nowhere town. But Marcus had to play hero. The air turned to ice. So you decided to kill him, Boone said flatly. He was supposed to stay down. Colt shouted. Nobody was supposed to check. You people bury your dead fast. I did my research. By the time anyone figured it out, I'd be in Mexico with the kid and... He didn't finish. Grizz's fist connected with his jaw. Colt crumpled. For a moment, the bikers stood over him, fists clenched, every muscle in their bodies screaming for violence. But Grizz stepped back, took a breath. Call the cops, he said. Boone stared at him. What? Call them, Grizz repeated. We do this the right way. Marcus would want it that way. Boone pulled out his phone, but his eyes never left Colt. You're lucky Steele's still breathing, Boone said, because if he wasn't, there wouldn't be enough of you left to arrest. 18 hours later, Marcus opened his eyes. The hospital room was white and sterile, filled with the steady beep of monitors. His body felt like lead. His mouth tasted like metal. He tried to remember where he was, what had happened, but his mind was full of fog. Easy, brother. Grizz's voice. Marcus turned his head, slow, everything was so slow, and saw his best friend sitting beside the bed. What? Marcus's voice came out as a rasp. What happened? Grizz leaned forward, and Marcus saw something he'd never seen before. Tears in his friend's eyes. A little girl saved your life, brother, Grizz said quietly. A little girl you saved 3 months ago. She stopped your funeral, told us you were still alive when nobody else believed her. Marcus's eyes widened. Memories flickered, blurry, fragmented. A parking lot, a child. Fear in her eyes turning to relief. She's okay? Marcus whispered. Grizz smiled. She's safe. Because of you. And you're alive because of her. Marcus closed his eyes, a single tear sliding down his weathered cheek. Where is she? He asked. Waiting to see you, Grizz replied. When you're ready. Marcus nodded slowly. He wasn't a religious man. Never had been. But lying in that hospital bed, pulled back from the edge of death by the courage of an 8-year-old girl, maybe miracles were real after all. The days after Marcus woke up were filled with questions, police reports, and a justice system that finally started paying attention. Colt was arrested and charged with attempted murder, kidnapping conspiracy, and bribery. The coroner's assistant who'd taken his money lost his job and faced charges of his own. But while the legal system churned, something quieter, something more important, was happening. Renee sat in a rehab center 2 towns over, the kind with actual counselors, real programs, and a chance at recovery. She didn't know who was paying for it. The administrators just told her it was taken care of. But Lila knew. She'd seen Grizz hand over an envelope of cash, his face stern but his eyes soft. We take care of our own, he'd said. And that kid? She's one of us now. Lila was placed with a foster family temporarily, a middle school teacher named Mrs. Chen, who'd noticed her before but never acted, never made the call. She'd carried that guilt for a long time, but she was determined to make up for it now. The small bedroom she gave Lila had clean sheets, a nightlight, and books on the shelf. Things Lila had never had before. And every Sunday, like clockwork, motorcycles would rumble up to the house. Grizz, Boone, and a few other brothers would stop by, bringing groceries, checking in, making sure Lila knew she wasn't alone. These dangerous men, these outlaws with their leather and tattoos and reputations, became the most reliable thing in her life. Marcus was released from the hospital after a week. The doctors called it a miracle. The toxicology report showed enough sedatives in his system to kill a horse, but somehow his body had held on. Barely. Like it was waiting for someone to notice. Grizz told him everything. About the funeral, about the little girl who crashed through the doors, about her 3 words that saved his life. Marcus sat in silence for a long time after hearing it all. I want to see her, he finally said. 2 weeks later, they met in the hospital garden. Marcus sat on a bench, still weak but getting stronger every day. The doctor said he'd make a full recovery, physically at least. The emotional weight of almost being buried alive was something else entirely. He saw her coming down the path with Mrs. Chen. Lila was cleaned up now, hair brushed, clothes that fit, shoes on her feet. But she still had that same cautious look in her eyes, like she was waiting for the world to hurt her again. When she saw Marcus, she stopped. Mrs. Chen gave her an encouraging nod. Go ahead, sweetie. Lila walked slowly toward him, clutching something against her chest. As she got closer, Marcus could see it was a drawing, crayon on construction paper, a man on a motorcycle with wings coming out of his back. An angel. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Lila stopped a few feet away, suddenly shy. This man had saved her once, and she'd saved him back, but they were still strangers in so many ways. Marcus slowly lowered himself to one knee, bringing himself to her level. His voice came out rough but gentle. You saved me, kid. Lila looked at her shoes. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, she whispered, You saved me first. Marcus felt something break open in his chest. All the walls he'd built after losing his sister, all the anger and pain he'd carried for 15 years. This little girl, this brave, fierce, incredible little girl, had crashed through all of it. Can I give you a hug? He asked. Lila nodded, and Marcus wrapped his arms around her carefully, like she was made of glass. She was so small, so fragile, but she'd been strong enough to stop a funeral, strong enough to stand up to a room full of bikers, strong enough to save a life. Thank you, Marcus whispered into her hair. Thank you for not giving up on me. Over the next few months, Marcus became Lila's court-appointed big brother through a mentorship program. He picked her up from school, took her for ice cream, taught her how to change a tire and throw a punch, just in case. The club became her extended family, rough men with soft hearts who'd all lost something and found purpose in protecting this one little girl. Lila taught Marcus something too. She taught him that being a warrior wasn't just about fighting. It was about showing up, about listening, about believing in people when the world told you not to. She taught him how to hope again. Because here's the truth that nobody talks about. Bikers aren't monsters. They're not villains in a story. They're fathers and brothers and sons. They're people who've made mistakes and carry regrets. They live by a code that society doesn't always understand. But that code includes loyalty, protection, and taking care of those who can't take care of themselves. The Hells Angels saved Lila because that's what family does. And Lila saved Marcus because sometimes the smallest voices tell the biggest truths. Sometimes the people society overlooks are the ones who see the clearest. Lila had every reason to stay silent, to hide, to survive alone, to let the world keep crushing her under its weight. But she didn't. She spoke up when no one else would. She stopped a funeral to save a life. She proved that courage doesn't come with age, it comes from the heart. And Marcus, he learned that being a warrior isn't just about strength or fearlessness. It's about protecting the vulnerable. It's about listening when a small voice says something nobody wants to hear. It's about believing in people, even when they're just 8 years old and covered in dirt. They saved each other. And sometimes that's what heroes do. So let me ask you, would you have believed an 8-year-old girl at a funeral? Could you have made that call? When everyone around you said she was wrong, confused, traumatized, would you have had the courage to open that casket? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I really want to know. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Stories like this remind us that courage doesn't have an age limit, and neither does compassion. Sometimes the smallest person in the room has the biggest heart. Subscribe for more real-life stories of bravery, redemption, and second chances. Stories about people who refuse to give up. Stories about unlikely heroes. Because every story deserves to be told, and every voice deserves to be heard. Thanks for watching. And remember, never underestimate the power of 3 small words from someone brave enough to speak them.